Lacrosse community, my name is Ryan Berns. I'm the founder of the Lax Leadership Institute. It's our mission to empower all those that love lacrosse, to recognize the skills you gain from the sport, to ultimately live your best life possible. Today, we're so fortunate to be joined by Andrew Manning. He takes care of pretty much everything or most of what's going on in the backside of the PLL, and it's a really interesting story about leadership and lacrosse that he's going to share with us today. Andrew, thank you so much. For those that don't quite know your story, can you share a little bit about how you got into lacrosse in the first place and where you are now?
Absolutely. So thanks for having me on, Ryan. I really appreciate it. This opportunity is awesome. So excited to share. A little bit about my background. Grew up just outside of Cleveland, Ohio, a town called Willoughby Hills, where I was first exposed to lacrosse actually in 8th grade when we caught an NLL game on what was back in the day the Outdoor Life Network. Looked awesome, so me and my buddies went out and bought some sticks, and then 2 years later we continued to just play around and have fun, but then we wound up starting a high school team at my rival high school. They had a coach there who had lacrosse, so we undertook the efforts of fundraising and uniforms and all that other stuff, and wound up being able to field a lacrosse team in Northeast Ohio. So it was a lot of fun back then. Played for 2 years, and then wound up going to the University of Pittsburgh, where I tried out for club and wound up hurting my knee again after tearing it in high school, and decided to give up the playing career shortly after that. But continued to follow the game and interact, and obviously, you know, is where the story kind of comes full circle. Is back in Northeast Ohio, there weren't a lot of camps and coaches that you can gain information from back in 2006 and 2007. So what do? You watch TV, and who's on TV besides the great Paul Rabil? So I watched him and continued to follow him, and then one day he posted on his Facebook that he was hiring. Wound up sending in an application out of the blue. I had worked in manufacturing my whole life, and sure enough, through a rigorous interview process, and about 3 months later, I wound up being fortunate enough to win the position as his special projects manager. And I've been with Paul for the last 6 years, working as a special projects manager, chief of staff, and then eventually working as a head of athlete events, and then head of operations for the PLL Academy once that started. And now I sit as sort of Lax operations, just managing the day-to-day and any sort of waiver transactions, trades, all that stuff comes through my desk for approval. So pretty cool journey, but grateful to be in lacrosse and have this opportunity to give back to the sport that taught me so much in high school.
Oh, Andrew, and that's why we love this conversation. We're so grateful to have you on. It starts with just seeing the sport and seeing the NLL. I know it's so high intensity. We had the Arizona Sting back in the day, and I remember just the brawls that were happening there. I thought, this is so intense.
Yeah.
But to see how your story has unfolded to now, you're part of the pinnacle of the game, and it's just so fascinating to see how your journey has stayed around lacrosse and given you this opportunity to be where you are today.
Absolutely. It's humbling to be a part of, but it makes you work hard, and it makes every day of work not feel like a day at work. So it's a good thing.
I think that's what we look for. It's if you love what you do, you don't work a day in your life, but obviously you're having a huge impact. If you look back at your life so far in terms of your interaction with lacrosse, whether it's playing or being with the PLL and Paul, do you have a pinnacle moment, or are there a couple pinnacle moments that really stick out to you?
So playing career pinnacle moment doesn't really exist. I guess we won one game, so that was the pinnacle moment. We won one game in my career, and that's the pinnacle moment. But in terms of just like being part of Paul's career and trajectory, and then the PLL, I think really the moment that sticks with me, there's about 3 of them that are pretty unique. The first one is obviously that first face-off in Gillette in 2019. That moment, and being able to see the product on the field, and Paul, Mike, and all of our visions come to life. That was unbelievable in a setting like that. The second one was the championship game in 2019, where the Redwoods started turning it around, and if you could be in that stadium, it felt like it felt like a freaking awesome sporting event because the crowd was engaged. I mean, it was like deafening. Every single goal the Redwoods scored, it was people were going nuts, and it was like, holy crap! Like this league that just started, right? With no home cities and all this other stuff. You had people involved, people bought in. The intensity was palpable. You can feel it, right? You yourself got tight, like sitting there on the sidelines and watching. So that was definitely, at least from like a feelings and emotional perspective, that's sort of the best one to me. So.
Oh, and I think that's, again, why we get drawn to the game is the emotions of the game, the intensity of the game, the emotions of the players allow us to feel connected with them. And we want to be on that field, but we realize that these guys are the epitome of athleticism. And for you guys to be able to aggregate all the top talent, put them on the field, like you said, the final product is unbelievable. Can you share a little bit about what that vision process looks like, or the execution to put that thing together?
You mean like rosters, or do you mean just like the game day?
From your perspective, either or. I think of like that championship game. What went into that on your side of things?
Oh man, there's so much that goes into it. There are so many people who work so hard at the PLL to make sure everything goes off without a hitch, right? And it starts with operations, and it includes ticket sales. It includes getting the local community involved. It involves giving away tickets for free through PLL Assist. It involves PLL Academy, going out there and building a connection with certain players by hosting clinics and stuff like that. I mean, with the Academy, it shows that, if you have the opportunity to be in a group of 15 to 20 kids training with a PLL pro, you're going to like that PLL pro from now on because of the experience you have with them. So then that factors into it, because you have kids and families on the sideline wearing this pro shirt, wearing this pro jersey, cheering like hell for that guy. And it's a big deal. And I mean, obviously broadcast lends a hand, right? Because they get everybody familiar with all these players' names, the schemes they run, all that other stuff. And, NBC did a great job. And then lastly, and probably most importantly, at least, is the social media team, right? We put out YouTube summaries about 10 minutes after the game's over. So if you miss the game, if you're at a tournament, let's say, all you do is click on YouTube, you watch a 10-minute summary, and you know exactly what happened, what the storylines were, and you build that connection with players through RJ too. And so it's every single aspect of the organization plays a hand. And it really, the product on the field that shows the greatest are the players and coaches. They're the ones who make this league something to watch, so we can build a product around. And the coaches work tirelessly. They hold other coaching gigs, right? But they find the time to manage their rosters, have conversations with pro athletes that aren't easy to have sometimes, and build a team in their vision, do film study on other professional athletes, right? These guys at the end of the day wind up working 80-hour weeks during the season, and it's unbelievable to see. And the players on the field, obviously, they dial it up and they train harder than anyone else with not the same incentive structure as other professional athletes. So it's ultimately, those guys put in a ton of work, and we're just happy to play a small role in getting them the recognition they deserve. So.
And there's, like you said, so many different parts that ultimately weave themselves together so that you get that end product. How do you go about organizing that, or what do you view as leadership in terms of getting that product on the field?
So it's all about being aligned in the same vision, right? Mike and Paul and other leaders in the PLL do a good job of telling us the end goal, and then they filter it down to make sure that everybody knows what their role is, how they can help out, and how we can get to the end goal. So it just starts from the top with that vision, and then they paint that vision so clearly and lay out some concrete steps to get there that everyone can easily follow along and chip in. So it's really well done.
So it sounds like that ideal leadership style is knowing what that mission is at the end of the day, so that singular goal, getting everyone in line with that goal, but then taking it a step further and saying, hey, these are the first 2 steps you can take to be able to do your part, and everyone has that part, and ultimately that's where you get there.
Yep, absolutely. And the good part about the PLL is everyone at every level, right? You have great minds and creativity, and above all, hard workers. And that's really important when you're part of a lean team, to think of not only creative solutions, but be able to execute on them. And it's really important when you're part of something small that anyone not only has the ability to execute on them, but feels comfortable enough to do so.
And that's critical in everything that we do. And we can take the sport of lacrosse and just look at the game itself and the different small roles that we all have, and ultimately take it to a business level and this experience level to give these players the exposure that they deserve and the congratulations for all that hard work. When you look at what you're doing on the operations side, how do you go? Are you in charge of everything on your own? Do you have a team? What does that look like?
So it depends on the role. I'm part of two teams. So I'm part of the PLL Academy team, and then I'm part of the lacrosse operations team. So lacrosse operations involves our general counsel. She's the head of the lacrosse operations team because she has to deal with contracts and all that other stuff, rule enforcement. Also on that team is Brian Silcott and Coach Seth Tierney. Brian and Seth are two of the brightest, funniest men I've ever met. Their creativity and ability to problem solve in extremely tense situations. Sometimes on the sideline, things can get a little dicey. Sometimes after the game, things can get a little dicey. Those guys always manage to be the calmer voice, find good solutions, and execute on them. So that's the lacrosse operations team. And then academy team, leader is Rachel DeCecco, Tuorton Award winner, defenseman, Princeton. So she's the boss. She sets the vision, and she even executes on it. She's humble enough to be able to put on a clinic of her own, just to benefit the PLL Academy. And I work alongside Josh Barrow, who's on your podcast a little bit ago, and then Big Alan Rabil, Paul and Mike's dad, who leads on our sales front, who's an unbelievable asset. The things I've learned from Al expand well beyond anything else that I know. He's a true old school, smooth talking salesman. And really has impacted my career in a way that's pretty profound in terms of the way that we interact and present and think about situations. And then working below me are actually PLL athletes and other professional athletes. So we employed Troy Ray, who's an LSM for Chaos LC, who won the championship this year. And then Mark Cockerton, who's a tackman, and he runs out of the box for Atlas. And then Lizzie Colson, too, who graduated from Maryland, was a Tuorton Award nominee. They work on the academy to set up events around the country. So if anyone on this call is looking to set up events, just reach out to them on Instagram and they'll get something set up for you.
Awesome. Well, it seems like you're a part of a lot of things. Lizzie was on our show even, and we had an awesome conversation with her. So that's cool to hear she's a part of your team now. One of the things you said was, on the operations side, sometimes you guys have really tough conversations or really heated moments, and it's your responsibility to quell hotter heads and bring that tension down. Can you share an example of that or elaborate a little bit more?
Well, I can't get too personal, but it's most important just to listen, right? A lot of these times, immediately after the moment, guys are really heated when they get, whether it's a bad call, they don't agree with the rule, something like that, right? So you listen to them, you process what they're saying. If they have merit, you could say, you know what, you're right. Let's figure out a way to fix this. We'll get back to you. But it's most important just to listen to what they're saying and understand where the frustration is coming from. And then you can sort of see to make it right. You can either say, hey, this happened like 3 other times this year. None of those other coaches complained. So why is it different for you? Kind of put it back on them. Alternatively, if somebody's like, hey, I've talked with like 3 other coaches and we don't think this is being enforced correctly, figure out like what's the way to correct it mid-season, right? Can we implement a different process? Can we change timelines up a little bit? Can we have a call together and see what the best way to do this is? So it's all about listening and communicating first and foremost. And then once you do that, you'll be able to see sort of where the friction is, where the tension is, and be able to find a solution after that.
And that's huge. I want to highlight on that. When we get upset, it's because we have some sort of expectation and then reality doesn't meet that. So there's a gap there. And some people are very vocal about being upset. Others may not even bring it up, but it's building inside them. So that communication aspect that you're talking about is just so massive. You have to be able to acknowledge first and foremost what's being said. So asking, hey, what's going on? And like you said, listen. We need that empathy. We need to be able to understand what perspective and what side of the story they're coming from. And then when we're able to take that in, we can internalize it, put ourselves in their shoes. And then ultimately, we know that there's more than just one person, which is interesting. You talk about the other coaches. It's, hey, how can we find a resolution? And the biggest thing I think that you said is sometimes we have to take on the burden and say, you know what, I'm sorry, this didn't work out well. This is what I'm going to do differently, or this is what the league's going to do differently to make sure it doesn't happen again. And you talked about updating the process, which is just so massive, because that's going to be what allows that upset to not happen again. Is that something that you've learned through lacrosse, or how did this come up, and how do you guys go about that moving forward?
I mean, listening and being able to react it's part of sports, right? If you aren't paying attention to what's going wrong and trying to correct it, then you're going to have a lot of losses, and not only a lot of losses, but no growth. And so that's hammered down from sports, or hammered into you from sports from the beginning. I think, you know, it's important to take yourself out of the driver's seat and sort of check any ego at the door that you have, because you realize that if the coaches are successful and happy, the league is successful and happy, right? So you got to put yourself in the back seat and realize, hey, these guys are the sort of commanders of their ship, and we need to make sure that they're comfortable in how they can operate and drive. And so, like, having that little bit of humility and listening to their concerns, as opposed to just saying, this is the way it is, this is the way it has to be, because I say so, and I'm the league. It's not going to work. So you have to be able to listen and react and know when you can change something, change it. If it's not going to hurt anyone, if it benefits everybody all the same, then what difference does it make?
What's coming up for me right now, Andrew, is, I mean, you have to make sure everyone's comfortable, but you guys are pushing the game of lacrosse, especially when I think about the All-Star game. You guys have been doing different face-off methods. You guys do different things to try to speed up the game, make it more entertaining. Broadcasting side, you guys have people mic'd up in the middle of the game, which is just awesome to be able to have that perspective. How do you guys go about having those ideas, or being able to talk with coaches and players and say it's not going to be a distraction, it's for the betterment of the game?
Yeah, so a lot of the players actually enjoy being on the mic. It gives them an opportunity to get that publicity and branding out there, and they really sort of enjoy the sound clips that come from it. They enjoy being able to communicate and build that brand for themselves. In terms of like the decision to sort of leverage it, I mean, the whole entire league was founded on the principle that athletes drive the value. And so the more that we can do to connect folks and give folks a view into these athletes, the stronger our league will be. So we're going to do anything and everything to try and give you a look behind the curtain at not only how these athletes operate on the field, but how their personalities are. It's the recipe for success for the PLL. It's been the staple since day one, is to showcase the skill, talent, and personality of our players. So, yeah.
And that is so true. When you let people be their individual self, they get to be authentic. And we mesh much better as a society if you are authentic and you can relate to people in one reason or another. So when someone doesn't get that call and they get heated and you see a palms up, you know, I could probably see where they're coming from.
Yeah.
Or when they get fired up with a goal or a good play. And it's just so enticing. And the idea that you guys empower the players so much to be their individual selves, to take on and bring it back to their community, is so big. Is that just part? It seems like that's been the mission from day one.
Absolutely. It's always been athlete driven. It always will be athlete driven. They're the key to the future, and you know, it's important that we give them a platform with which to grow on. So.
Now, how do you take these athletes who are their individual selves? You want them to have power, you want them to have agency, but you guys have a mission of the league as well. How do you align everyone's goals?
Do you mean like in terms of like league?
For instance, our personal brands are all we have. So we have to make sure that we have integrity, respect, and all these things. Sometimes people's lives take them in different directions, or something happens that may not align with the brand that we want to uphold. How do you guys go about maybe do you guys set ground rules for the players, or what do you do to uphold the image and the brand and the player's character?
So yeah, there's certain things that you are and aren't allowed to post about on social media. Obviously, like every single league, you can't post something that's graphically offensive or something like that. It's not allowed. But we do like to give them as much leniency as we can afford, whether it be trash talk, whether it be personal brand development photos. We give these guys a lot of free reign, and then even endorsement deals, right? We work really hard to make it so these guys can make more money off of endorsement deals, whether they be league sponsors or not. There are minimum thresholds baked into each guy's contract that equipment companies, hard good companies have to uphold. And so, we really want to raise the floor from where it was. Previously guys would get just like free equipment or something like that for being an athlete. And we want to raise that floor because we know what the athlete's worth. We know what a pro endorsement is worth to these companies, and we want to make sure that they can get there.
Is that something that you're responsible for and having that negotiation, or what does that look like?
It's more so legal and HR. So it's not directly through me now.
And you said the operations, one of your roles is making sure that game day rosters are completed and up to date. Is that right?
Mm-hmm.
What does that look like? What do trades look like? How do those conversations go about?
So most of the time with trades, it's coach to coach, and then they'll call Brian and I and inform us of the deal. We'll determine probably in the course of a couple minutes whether or not it's accepted or rejected. There could be stuff that we know that the other coach doesn't. It's never happened before, but we could just unilaterally reject a deal if we feel like it's not in fair order. Just something like this guy's injured or this guy doesn't have a contract, like stuff like that. It could wind that other coaches don't have access to. And so then we reject it and go under this new notification that like, hey, this is happening in the background. It may change your deal. But to date, pretty much every trade's been accepted by the league. At which point, we inform the media team, we inform the coaches, and then we'll publish the trade, probably within an hour or two. After that, it's just all dependent on getting new equipment, new uniforms, new room assignments, new travel assignments, new all this other stuff. So it's all just a lot of information, and then other teams execute on it once that word's sent out.
So it sounds like, there's so much that goes into it, but logistically for game day, you guys are responsible for getting all the players there, getting them all together and making sure that everything's taken care of. Is that your responsibility or the team's responsibility?
So that's actually different operations team's responsibility. So they hold the hotel booking, the travel booking, practice schedules, game schedules, all that other stuff. They're responsible for the equipment team and all that other stuff. I'm more so just the informant at the top. So when a coach submits his 19-man game day roster on Tuesdays at 6 o'clock, that's what I send out to all the teams, and then they're able to execute on it accordingly with room blocks, with equipment, with uniform making, and then NBC is able to publish the rosters and get graphics up there. It all stems from that roster submission on Tuesdays. Well, it was Tuesdays. We'll see if it's the same this year.
Man, well, Andrew, thank you so much for taking the time to share a little bit of perspective on what's going on in the PLL, your background with lacrosse, and your awesome journey. I know we're wrapping up on time. Do you have any last comments or stories about lacrosse or leadership that you can share with our community?
I'd like to just sort of say that the support from the community as a whole for the PLL has been really humbling. And it's really awesome to see across social media, in stadium, pretty much everywhere, that people really are actually excited for the game at a professional level for a change. And it's really refreshing to see, and it gives motivation each day to try and improve and make everything better day by day. So just a humble thank you for somebody who's been grinding away on this, and knowing that your support and your fandom and everything else really goes a long way.
Well, Andrew, you guys are up to some amazing things. And as a fan, I don't know if I can speak for everyone, but we love what you're doing. It's so much fun to watch these guys. And I imagine it's going to be just like when you were watching that NLL game. There's little guys that haven't heard of lacrosse before, or gals. They view the game, they see it on NBC, and they go, wow, this seems like an awesome sport. Let me go to Dick's. Let me go to Big Five. they're going to get a stick, and 20 years from now, they could be in the same spot as you. So thank you so much for all that you're doing, and thanks for being a part of this. It's been a really great conversation.
Absolutely. Appreciate you having me.